Welcome to the Vortex Nation podcast, brought to you by lovers of hunting, shooting, public lands, the Second Amendment, and good food. All right, we're going to talk about a type of competition shooting, one that I think a lot of people know of and know about. Oh, Mark.
Dude,
with the phone call.
Classic faux pas.
Immediately.
Faux pas for sure. So it's a type of competition shooting that a lot of people know of or about or have probably heard this phrase before. We're going to PRS shooting. It stands for Precision Rifle Series, correct? And we have a couple of folks on the podcast today with us who participate or have participated in PRS shooting. We've got Scott Parks here. He was on Long Range Shooting 1002. And then we have a new guest for the podcast, Nick Laufenberg. We got Ruben here too. He's been on a couple of times. Rube does some competition shooting. I don't think have you done PRS before, Rube?
So I've done about a half dozen long-range shooting events. None of them were sanctioned PRS events.
Okay, that's interesting.
PRS
Let's talk about that
style
a little bit.
of shooting.
Yeah. Obviously, lots of three-gun competition shooting experience. So you've been to matches quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Mark, how about you?
No PRS for me, man.
Yeah, neither have I. But I have shot a couple Vortex Extremes. I know that those are not like PRS, but
that's true. Well, I guess I can say that as well. You know, I mean, I'd probably, some similar applications of the
long range shooting
equipment
where points are attached.
Right. Yes.
Well, don't sell yourself short, Mark. I mean, you set up the Vortex Extreme, so you know a little about it.
With a lot of help from a lot of other folks,
tidbits.
but yeah.
There you go.
Mr. Modest.
So to start out, I figure the best way to go into this Scott, you have probably the most extensive PRS experience in this room. And then Nick, you're kind of getting into it, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty fresh.
And so we'll kind of lean on you guys. Scott being the more experienced one, and then Nick being somebody actively getting into this, because we want to talk about how to kind of get into it. It's a little bit of a, I think to some people from the outside, it's kind of a black box, right? It seems like how do what's the best way to get into this? It seems really cool, but it's not always super straight cut, maybe, or there's not a lot of conversation out there as to how to really just dive in on it. And so, Scott, maybe you can explain. So what is PRS for those not familiar?
PRS, so the Precision Rifle Series, started in 2012-ish. The idea was there was a bunch of us that just wanted to see how we stacked up against other people in other regions of the country. So the basis behind it in the beginning was just honestly to create a scorekeeping body for matches around the country, and then maybe have a championship match at the end of the year based off of those scores.
So you in 3-gun, we would say there's outlaw matches, right? And then all of a sudden a governing body comes along and creates a unified type of scoring, unified type of record keeping of people and stuff. So that's kind of what you're getting at, right?
Pretty much, yep.
Yeah, so these types of matches had been going on for a while.
Oh, yeah, for years. Absolutely.
So then essentially, like you said, a sanctioning body, so to speak, comes in, or I guess rules are sort of attached and things like that, and scores start getting kept. Is that how it kind of becomes, is that the series part of it? Is that how it becomes a series?
Yeah, pretty much. So eventually what happened is since, the PRS came out and said, that basically they want to keep scores for these matches, and then have a championship match at the end of the year. Went around and talked to all the different match directors and found out which ones wanted to be a part of it, which was the majority of them, because it's going to attract more shooters to their matches also. Anytime you do something like that, it's going to grow the sport if it's ran correctly and organized, right? So yeah, that's how it all got started. And, for the first couple of years, that's really all the PRS did was keep scores. But then as time went on, you grow and you try to make things better. Sometimes those things work, sometimes they don't, as far as they tried to unify some scoring system and that kind of stuff. So there are some basic rules and guidelines that come along with being part of a PRS match for a match director. Nothing too hard or complicated or anything like that, but yeah.
Okay. What does a PRS match generally kind of look like? What kind of shooting scenarios are going on? What, are there stages? How does that work?
What kind of gear are you using too?
Yeah.
Right. So we'll hit the match first. So most matches, if we're talking an actual Precision Rifle Series match or a National Rifle League match, which we can also get into later
NRL.
on. NRL, yeah, just another governing body of matches, right? Depending on who's putting on the match and where it's at, you're going to shoot over a 2-day period anywhere from 15 to upwards of close to 30 stages over those 2 days.
Oh, whoa, definitely some stages. Cool.
Yeah. The stages will be anywhere from 30 seconds long to 2 or 3 minutes long, generally. I mean, you have your outliers every once in a while, some oddball stages that might be shorter or longer.
Right.
But for the most part, you're going to have stages that are 30 seconds or 45 seconds to about 2 minutes. Your average distance, I think a lot of people hear, long-range precision shooting and precision rifle shooting, and they think, oh, well, the majority of the match must be all long-range, and
like over 1,000 yards or something.
Right. And that's generally not the case. I'll tell you, if you can go to a match and hit every target inside of 600 yards and miss every target past 600 yards, you're going to be in the top 5.
Yeah, you're still going to do pretty
if
good.
not win.
Interesting.
Yeah.
However, those shots inside of 600 yards, they aren't off your belly. You're shooting out of cars, out of vehicles, on cars, barricades, through tires, in culverts, on culverts, helicopters that are flying or standing still.
Logs, boulders.
Whoa. Flying helicopters. You're shooting precision rifle out of flying helicopters?
Yeah, they will. Certain matches have helicopters, yeah.
How do you shoot, Jim?
The wrong way, apparently.
Don't really.
So I've seen Jim dump some rounds out of helicopters, though. Let it be
true.
known.
Yeah, but
He's
let it
got
also be
skills.
known it wasn't precision rifle shooting. It was, I don't know what to call that.
A little bit
to
of
say the
finger
truth.
crossing, probably.
Yeah, a little bit of
I
trigger
said,
slapping.
Yeah, I did say dump rounds.
There you go.
Well,
So-
then, Scott, some of that stuff that's maybe not like super crazy long range, though. And like I said, I've never been to a PRS match, but I'd imagine, target size probably comes into play too, as far as like how challenging a shot is.
Absolutely. It's all going to be according, right? Like, so if you've got targets at 500 yards that are under 5 inches, pretty much, unless the match director just really is messing with you, that's going to be a prone shot.
Yeah.
Right. Typically, the majority of your targets at a PRS match are going to be between 2 and 4 MOA, with a few 1 MOA targets that you're shooting prone.
Gotcha. But yeah, when you brought up like all the different shooting scenarios, I think that's one that always just stuck out to me a little bit when I see or hear people talking about PRS. I see people shooting off a lot of different kinds of barricades. I see people shooting, it looks like they construct some walls where there's like different like slots and holes and ports and things that you got to shoot out of. Is that, and maybe this will get into also, because you mentioned there's NRL. Rube said he's been to some long range shooting events. So is that maybe what makes PRS different from other ones? Or I guess, what other shooting events are there out there? And what kind of makes the PRS particularly unique for long range?
Honestly, probably because the PRS was just the first to do it.
To kind of organize it?
Yeah, to kind of organize and be, it's just been around the longest. So therefore, even a match that isn't even affiliated with the PRS is referred to as a PRS style match, right?
Okay.
We have the NRL now, but I think the majority of the time people probably still refer to the NRL matches as a PRS style match.
It's very similar in how
even
it's
though
set
they're
up
even though they're competing organizations.
Okay. Are there then the NRL is one that's popped up quite a bit. I've heard NRL 22, and I think that's fairly new.
Yeah,
relatively speaking. Does PRS have different like like in 3 gun you got limited division, you have TAC Ops division, you have stuff open division. Does PRS have different divisions, or was that unique for NRL to have like this 22 kind of thing?
No,
or?
so the NRL 22 is totally separate from NRL, I guess, standard NRL.
Not even the same matches, right?
Right. It's not even the same matches. Totally
really?
separate. It's like a league within a league type thing. But yes, the PRS itself does have multiple divisions. So they have a gas gun series for ARs, and within that gas gun series, they have an open division or a TAC division. The open division obviously is probably self-explanatory. Just shoot anything you want.
Yeah.
As long as it's a gas gun. And then the TAC division is, 223.
Oh,
or
specifically
308, yeah, 223,
308. Okay.
Yeah.
And that
I'll
is
be
that
honest
the
with
only
you,
like
I haven't.
I shoot mostly 5.56. Is that going to be a problem?
Get out.
I knew Mark was going to ask it.
you beat me.
Yeah, that one was teed up.
And I'm not sure. I haven't followed that division real close. So 308, it may not even include a 308, to be honest with you. It may just be 223.
Okay.
The attack division for gas gun.
Okay.
Whereas for bolt gun, there's an open division and then attack division, which is 223 or 308.
Okay. For bolt gun.
Right.
Gotcha. And that's, you said PRS?
PRS.
Does NRL then have like their own kind of thing where it's similar, where there's gas gun and?
No, they just run a
okay.
regular league.
Pretty straight up. And then there's this sort of
and then they have
offshoot
the
with
NRL
the
22. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, what kind of, or I guess I think Rube said this earlier, what kind of equipment are people usually running? Like, is a PRS gun different from like someone's regular long range precision gun? Are they really heavy? Are they really light? Do you want to like?
It's kind of all over the place. I think the longer it's been around, the more people realize that they probably benefit from having a heavier gun. Not so heavy that you're, crippling yourself carrying a thing from stage to stage. Mm-hmm. But, 15 to 20 pounds is not out of the ordinary, or 15 to 18 pounds.
Mm-hmm. Is a gun usually supported?
Yes, and that's the reason why, right? Because the number one thing that you need to do when you're shooting PRS is be able to see where your bullet's impacting, whether you're missing or hitting, right? Because you just need to know what's going on with the wind. I mean, that's the name of the game.
So you're spotting yourself through your rifle.
Spotting yourself. Yeah, you don't.
Is that kind of what you're talking about when you talk about driving the rifle?
Absolutely.
Okay. Somebody actually asked us that question. We'll maybe get into it. We'll let you keep talking equipment here, but we'll get into like that kind of stuff in a little bit. But so you say it's maybe kind of a heavier rifle, and they got to be able to not a ton of felt recoil.
As little as possible.
That's kind of what you're going for.
Yeah.
And is that sort of where like is that why a lot of guys are using like the 6mm stuff?
Absolutely.
Okay.
A lot lower mass bullet.
Yeah. And then, so are you moving a lot when you're actually like shooting? Is there like, would you ever be shooting in one spot and this is in the same stage and then like sprint to another spot or something like that?
Absolutely.
Does that happen fairly frequently?
Yep. Quite a bit.
Okay. So you do have to be able to move with it. You can't just set up with just some giant sled of a. Gotcha.
Right. Yeah. You wouldn't want to do that.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, Nick.
Yeah.
Let's talk to you now. Actually, MC Ryan here just reminded me too that we never got to let you introduce yourself.
Oh, sure.
What do you do here?
Well, right now I'm in military and law enforcement sales. I'm getting into the PRS stuff a lot more. Really enjoying it, and hopefully Scott can show me the reins a little bit because he definitely has a lot more experience than myself.
So, what's it been like for you, like getting into PRS?
I've done mostly the long range stuff off my belly, in the fields, just seeing what I can stretch a rifle out to. It has been kind of baffling to see just how different it is. A lot of guys talk about long range shooting, and it's always prone position. I can hit a target this far.
Tons of time.
That's awesome.
Nick's definitely being a little bit modest about himself. Like, I know out his back door where he grew up, he basically gets up, brushes his teeth, drinks his orange juice after he brushes his teeth, and then goes and lays on his back porch and shoots like a mile out your back. Right, you got a long range out your back.
We
door.
can get up to 1350 at my mom and dad's.
Yeah, so this guy's like his
You
youth
shoot
was
long
like
range
Davy
for some
Crockett's
time now.
youth.
But it is completely different than these type of matches. Being able to build your position and steady a rifle off of something that's not steady or something that's very uncomfortable. Laying down on your stomach and having an adjustable cheek rest and being just completely comfortable on a bag compared to, throwing your rifle over top of a tree stump and trying to somehow steady. Or the last match I shot in, Jim C set up a pretty fun stage where he had, I think it was 4 tires out there and then a pallet and you got to start with your rifle outside the box and in a barrel. Yeah. And you start and you got to build your position. And that means moving your pallet, moving your barrel, and then actually building something to shoot off
you
of.
actually had to like construct like a fort?
And then put rounds on target
while you're on the clock.
While you're on the clock. So
and when you say on the clock, it's not sort of like an unlimited amount of time and you just like whoever does it quickest is best. Like you're actually
you got 90 seconds. Go.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. So I mean, and that's another aspect of it is learning how to control yourself and keep your composure, because once you start picking up tires and throwing them around and stuff before getting on your rifle, your heart's thumping a little bit harder than it was before. So it's a different dynamic, and it's a lot
I
lot of fun.
would have built my fort and then forgot to shoot and been super embarrassed, but
pretty happy
Get the
with
coloring
your
book
fort.
out.
pretty happy with the fort. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of exciting.
That's
Start
cool.
telling, people start coming in trying to tell you that you're like done with your stage, and you just start like, no, get away,
Come on in,
stop it.
Stuart.
Yeah,
That's super cool to hear Nick talk about his kind of roots in shooting, because even if you're laying prone, you still can work on fundamentals like trigger press and the grip and building that rest and stuff. And so those things that you practice when you're not on the clock and you practice them like from prone position or from a bench, like when you're under stress and your heart's beating a lot faster and stuff, those are things that need to just be instinctual, completely in the subconscious.
When you decided to like start getting into the PRS stuff, was that just out of a desire to be like, I'm just kind of like, I want to do something else other than just laying prone and shooting at long range, or or was there any particular like, I want to work on this one skill, or?
Well, I think, just from me and my old man going shooting stuff and just spending a lot of time just doing regular long range, that type of thing. When I started working here, it was something that I wanted to do because I saw it as kind of, okay, so this is different. It's a new thing to work on, hone skills in a different area. And, it's been a lot of fun so far. I got a lot of learning to do, but, it's a lot of fun. I'm enjoying it quite a bit.
Yeah. What did it look like when how many matches have you done this far?
I think my next one will be number 5, I think.
Okay.
So pretty fresh.
Yeah. What did you do? What was the process of getting into number 1? So you're in Wisconsin here.
Mm-hmm.
The process of getting into match number 1, I mean, what does that look like? Is it pretty much just kind of like, hey, sign up and show up? Or
Well, pretty fortunate that when I started for Vortex, it was not long after the Border Wars series came to be, which we're the title sponsor for. So I had a drove of information pretty quickly.
Right, okay.
Yeah, but the local matches and stuff is a really easy way to get into it. Kind of see what it's all about, see if you like it. I went to my first actual sanctioned PRS match with Scott this year, and that was eye-opening. Didn't do well, but it is what it is. I learned a lot just from being there, so that's a big thing.
So you're doing the ones that Scott you were describing earlier as like where people call it PRS style, right?
Yeah,
that's like a local match.
Yep.
And that's probably similar to like 3-gun, right, Rube?
Oh,
There's
yeah, for
local
sure.
3-gun matches that people can find, and they might be a certain style.
Yeah, they have like a match flavor, like Dave Hartman says, like what's the flavor of the match if you're in Kentucky? That's like Andy Horner flavor. If you go to Texas, that's Jeremy Moore and Dissident Arms flavor. Like there's different flavors all over, and then if there's a major match in that area, typically it kind of carries over the flavor of what the locals are. So we have the Border Wars series up here in the Midwest, and I know that we have one here at Winnequa, right? So that obviously carries over a lot of the same flavor as what you can do at that particular range. Just any day of the week, you're gonna be shooting at the same targets and the same same wind direction and stuff like that. So
Yeah. For finding those matches, I feel like one of the things that I take for granted is working here. About a lot of these competitions going on. For somebody who isn't like plugged in all the time, right? Like we are there like Facebook pages you can go
Absolutely.
to? Are there what's the best way to seek out where a local match might be, and then also to seek out once you've decided you really want to jump in where you might be able
ask.
Shooting forums, Facebook.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Facebook groups for different like local matches and stuff.
Quickest, easiest way to find out if there's anything in your area, though, is the PRS has a club series, and there are clubs all over the country now. So you can literally go to the Precision Rifle Series webpage, click on the club link, and if you for some reason you can't find anything, shoot an email to Precision Rifle Series. I'm able to imagine it's like info@Precision Rifle Series or something along those lines. I'm sure they have a link on their website, and just shoot me an email, and they definitely will point you in the right direction. The other thing, obviously, the NRL. If you're, the NRL is mostly kind of center of the country and west, and then of course we got the Border War series. So if you're in the Midwest anywhere, and the Border War series expanded. Originally, hence the name Border Wars. It was Iowa, Minnesota, Illinois, Wisconsin. But now it's
Missouri and
Missouri,
even south.
Nebraska, South Dakota, Indiana.
Nice.
So
Okay.
It's growing fast.
yeah. So
No, that's kind of interesting how you say that though, that there's local stuff going on, because when I first started hearing about PRS, it was from a buddy of mine, whose name's Mason, and he's actually a PRS competitor
in Minnesota.
in
right?
Minnesota, yeah. And so he is from central Minnesota, but they're up in northern, on the Lake Superior a lot, and I would see things pop up on his Facebook page once in a while, like, oh, we were out at the range doing this thing, and they're actually going out to like Forest Service land having these PRS style matches. And if you're in northern Minnesota before Border Wars came up, like that was probably about, if you didn't know about that one, you were probably going to be driving a long ways. And so finding out about those little things, like I always say ask, because even if you were to check out like one of the Facebook groups about it, those guys might not be on there, or they might be, but if you were to just say, hey, I'm looking for, shooting, here's where I'm located. Somebody's the shooting sports are typically just packed full of people who are crouched and ready for a new shooter to raise their hand and be like, I need help.
Yeah.
You'll have people on you before they can,
you can go on Facebook and you just search any of the long range groups and join one of those groups and just ask questions, and you'll get answers. Another resource would be like sniperside.com. They have a competition forum on sniperside.com that you can go to. I mean, there's resources out there if you want to shoot. I can tell you, being a male and being around a bunch of males here, the biggest thing that keeps people from going out and actually shooting their first match is ego.
Oh, yeah.
I was just gonna say, man, because like the more you guys explain this, like I'm kind of asking this to tee it up, like almost as though there's a secret to get in. It doesn't seem like it's like a secret society of long range shooters. I mean, it's like it's out there, and very similar in many ways to. There's 1,001 podcasts out there and resources out there that help you get into 3-gun, and I'm sure there's resources that help you get into PRS and stuff. I'm not saying that we're groundbreaking right here doing the first time ever, but like, is it the kind of thing that some dude or gal right now who's just sort of like not very experienced, like for whatever reason in my head, it's like kind of intimidating to jump into this,
Yeah.
It's very intimidating when you first try.
Yeah. Like what do you recommend for somebody who is in that sort of like, they're kind of intimidated? I mean, is it one of those sports where like, if you jump in, it's kind of like everyone's going to be like, hey, buddy, yeah, it's not all right if you're kind of crappy at it, but like we'll get better at it? Or should you almost practice a little bit more and like kind of...
If you want to do it, just come out and do it. It's probably one of the most welcoming crowds you will ever meet.
That's one of the things I noticed right
Really?
away.
So like the monster quote, I'm using air quotes, is in your own head.
Yeah, absolutely. If you and here's the thing, I recommend this to everybody that's wanting to get into it. If you can't muster up the courage to go out and do it, because I understand, man, it's hard. It's something new, and just like start anything new, it's a little scary. Go out, call a match director of just a local club match and ask him if you can come out and help be a range officer for the match. And that way, at least then you'll get to see how the stuff runs.
Yeah.
You'll get to meet all the guys, see how nice they are, and I promise you, the match director is not going to turn down help.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah.
So that's a surefire, easy way to get into it and meet a bunch of people and see what it's all about. And you, at the same time, you get to learn from watching guys shoot. There's inevitably there's going to be some good shooters there that you can watch, and you'll pick up on that. You'll see what kind of gear they're running.
Yeah, on gear, actually, when I started shooting USPSA in 2008 or 2009, I started going to matches up in Minnesota. I had a gun that I wanted to shoot, and I had been watching videos on YouTube and on forums, basically looking at what other shooters were using. And I was just convinced that I wanted to shoot I had an XD 5-inch 40 at the time, and I was like, that'll be perfect limited gun, and I can go. And so I started like going to the range and practicing reloads and practicing shooting, and I bought some Dawson sights for it, and I bought a Powder River trigger, and I show up to my first match, and Brian Payne's like, you don't want to shoot that, man. You want to shoot that little Glock 17 you got over there. And I was like, no, man, this is the better gun. I dropped like $800 into getting this thing ready. And he's like, no. No, you don't. So, like, you can be setting yourself back, right? I could have spent those 3 months practicing with the Glock 17 that I ended up shooting for, over 2 years in that competition. Instead, you're kind of like, no, I'm just going to learn this so that when I show up, I don't look like an idiot. And guess what? I didn't look like I knew what I was doing the first time anyways. So you just got to ask, because you can really be setting yourself back if you don't.
There really is two really strong points there. One, you go to any of these matches, even if you're completely new to it and you don't have any gear, I can just about guarantee you don't have a barricade bag or something. A guy in your squad is going to say, hey, use my bag. Everybody's super willing to help out just because you're new to the game and everybody wants you to be a part of it, which is super cool. You don't get that everywhere you go. But the other thing is with the gear itself is, I find from just the amount of time that I've been in it, my gear has kind of gone in waves. Started off with absolutely nothing, went to a match, saw what other people are using, bought some new stuff to try out. Now I got a whole bunch of gear, and then I try to consolidate it down to as little as possible, and then I see something else.
The gear evolution with Nick was funny, dude.
You get a bunch of stuff, you try to slim down, and then you slim down, then you're like, well, now I can get some nicer stuff.
Yeah, I think you switched chassis like 2 or 3 times, like even in your first few matches.
Before he shot a match.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, man. No, I guess it's my second chassis right now.
Okay.
Yeah, but still, I mean, in 5 matches, 2 chassis. I mean, that's a lot of going through stuff. But I was like, oh man, I wish I could do that. That looks like it's super handy. I get that, and like, maybe I didn't need that. But you see some of these guys that are super good at the game and they come up with the absolute bare essentials, and then you see guys that have 40 bags on them, and they also do good. It's all about learning what you need to accomplish the goal that you want to accomplish, and I'm still trying to figure that one out for myself.
To those points that people brought up, I mean, I've never met a jerkbag PRS shooter. Everyone I've ever met has been super nice.
Mm-hmm.
They're super helpful. I mean, gosh, they're just like, dude, they're so dang smart. That's the one thing that really trips me out about a lot of PRS shooters is like you go up to them and they're just like thinking on another level of shooting than you are.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it's just the ones that I don't know, but like there's a lot that goes into it. I mean, especially when you're talking about long range shooting. I mean, it's like those guys know. I mean, you're dealing with so many different variables in every match, and it's like you start dealing with different conditions because your matches might be in different locations, different altitudes, different, you name it. You start dealing from different shooting positions where maybe now your rifle is canted slightly or whatever, you're uncomfortable. You have to deal with now like parallax and mirage and stuff. It seems
ballistics are fairly important too, right?
Ballistics, exactly. I mean, it seems like one that you end up, one way or another, whether you like it or not, you end up having to know a lot of stuff to shoot PRS. I mean, would you guys say that's accurate?
Yeah, you do, but it's not to the point that, especially these days, it's not overwhelming. I don't think you can kind of make of it what you want. Honestly, you can get by and shoot very well without understanding how your ballistic computer gets to the solution it gets to.
Yeah, okay.
If you have the numbers you need.
Right. I mean, that's kind of, we have some people around here that are real wizards at Excel, but I'm assuming they probably couldn't write the code to write Excel, right?
True. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's kind of the same principle. You just have to know how, if you're using a Kestrel for your ballistics, you just have to know which buttons to push to give you the right information that you need.
Yeah. The biggest things for me is it's just learning how to get into a steady position and learning to, when you're under stress, to pull the trigger only when you're on target. And that sounds simple, but it's a head game, a lot of it.
It really is. Yeah. If you aren't 100% mentally focused, you absolutely can end up pulling the trigger when you're not on target. And then you go, why did I do that?
Why did I do that?
And that's a bigger deal than it is in a lot of shooting sports because you're dealing like with some limited round counts,
absolutely.
Right? So.
Yeah. This typically the majority of your stages are you're going to be limited to 1 round per target or 2 rounds per target. Very seldom do you get more than that.
Yep.
The key to PRS shooting is not getting too wrapped up in getting the best gear or the flattest shooting round or highest BC bullet out there or the latest, greatest bag or stock. Or the key is to practice. If you want to be good at it, you need to spend that time practicing rather than worrying about what your gear is.
Well, do you think some of that practice too, like maybe even starting without, right, helps teach you what you do need?
Absolutely. I think we got into this a little bit on Precision Rifle 1002, right? That was the last one I was on.
Yep.
A lot of guys run out, get into PRS right off the bat, and they start running, and they just start right off the bat with a muzzle brake on their rifle without really learning how to, like we said, drive the rifle first, right?
Oh yeah, we got to talk about that.
And you can get by with that. However, if you learn how to drive a rifle without a muzzle brake first, that muzzle brake's going to be even that much more effective later on. So if you don't really know how to drive the rifle and you're in an awkward position, even a muzzle brake's not going to keep your scope on target. Whereas if you spend time learning how to truly shoot a rifle and stay on target after recoil, then a muzzle brake or even a silencer works wonders. So it's really key, man. You just got to practice. I can tell you, I don't practice enough. I never have.
Yeah.
Some people do, and they do. And those are the guys that are on top these days.
Mm-hmm. Can you, real quick, for the folks who asked in that 1002, the long range 1002, how do you drive a rifle?
It's just a technique. So when I say driving a rifle, typically it just means shooting a rifle properly in order to be able to see your report, right? You want to see where that bullet's in. It doesn't matter if you're shooting at 100 yards or 200 yards. Obviously 100 yards, your scope's going to allow you to see the target. However, if you're shooting at 100 yards in a PRS match, chances are the time is very short. So you want your gun on. You don't want to be searching for your target. You want to be able to stay on that every shot. So typically, to properly drive a rifle, and there's more than one way to skin a cat, but the basics of it are is to be directly behind the gun. You don't want your body off at 90 degrees to the rifle. You want to be perfectly in line with the gun. You want to be relaxed. You can. There are some guys who free recoil. I don't really subscribe to that.
Free recoil? Is that like free Wheezy or something?
So what I like to do is actually slightly pull the gun into my shoulder, my whole upper body relaxed, isolating my right bicep to pull the gun into my shoulder. So literally the only muscles I'm activating when I'm on, and now I'm talking about shooting. Right now, I'm just describing prone, and then you can morph this into any other position.
Can the average sized human pull their rifle in with enough force, like the average sized bicep? Because you have a big bicep.
Yeah. You just need a slightest bit of pressure.
Can a normal sized
boa
person
constrictor around
pull
his
this
neck?
off?
Slightest bit of pressure.
All right.
And at the same time, you got to have the bipod loaded just a little bit, which,
Is that where you're pushing into the bipod forward?
Well, or kind of. So you don't really want to be pushing into the gun.
Okay.
So loading the bipod is having a slight forward pressure on the bipod legs. Okay. However, if you're pushing into the gun at the same time, now your body's tense, which you don't want. So you want your whole upper body relaxed, right? You don't want to be holding yourself up on your elbows.
Yeah.
You need everything relaxed with that. Like I said, isolating your right bicep, slightly pulling the gun into your shoulder, all while keeping that forward pressure on the bipod.
Whoa!
So are you kind of activating that forward pressure almost in essence, kind of before you're settling in to shoot?
So typically the weight of the gun will load the bipod for you. Okay, so there's a couple ways to do it. One, you can scoot forward into the gun and get that pressure on the bipod, and then let the gun, and then just don't disturb the gun while you get the rest of your body in position. The other way you can do it is just lift up the buttstock while dragging the gun back on the bipod, and then just letting the buttstock fall.
Oh yeah.
And then that'll push the bipod forward. Okay.
So what is that giving? I guess I'd assume it gives you kind of another, not just a contact point, but like a more stable contact point than just resting the bipod, you know.
Because you don't want bipod bounce. You don't want
exactly
bounce, right?
Yeah. So it basically gets equal pressure throughout the gun going forward. So it's kind of grabbing onto the ground, so to speak.
So you also want to be able to control your recoils so that you have a follow through that is constant. You want to be able to properly follow through with your shot, because when you break a shot, you need to have that recoil come back to you.
Sure. And there are some tools that you can use. So or some gear, I should say. Like, for me, I prefer B&T Industries Atlas bipods because they have play in the legs, and therefore literally the weight of my gun loads itself. The gun loads the bipod because the legs fall back just a little bit. So I really don't have to do anything except for just make sure my gun is leaning forward.
Okay.
Harris bipods, which are still really popular these days because they're quick, right? They're quick to deploy, quick to fold back up. However, they are definitely the hardest bipod to load. It takes some practice to learn how to properly load a Harris bipod. And there's plenty of guys that do it great. Like I said, with me though, I choose to use an Atlas because it just takes that variable out. I don't have to worry about that really per se. I got to worry about that my gun is pushed forward on it, but that's it. So then the other key aspect, so we talked about isolating the biceps with a slight pull into the shoulder. And then really the last key after that is to making sure that your trigger finger is at a 90 degree from the trigger and that you're pulling straight back.
That's why a lot of these stocks nowadays and chassis have like a super up and down vertical looking pistol grip, right?
Yeah, it helps.
Okay.
Absolutely, that can help. It's not 100% necessary, but it definitely helps with that. Because what'll happen is if you're pulling even the slightest bit to the left or to the right, that's the direction your gun's going to go when you pull the trigger. So if you're pulling back and to the right, I promise you, after you shoot, your sight is going to be left of the target.
Yeah, your barrel is going to end up being pointed left after your recoil.
Right. So you just have to think you want that gun recoiling straight back. And as long as you can get it straight back and you have your bipod loaded, so you got your bipod loaded to mitigate muzzle jump, right? And you've got everything else you're doing perfectly straight in line with the gun, everything from your trigger finger to your body. And that allows the gun to recoil straight back. So in theory, right, now I'm not talking with like a 300 Ultra Mag or something on a 6-pound gun, but with a PRS style gun, you should be able to get to the point to where you can watch your bullet break the paper at 100 yards.
That's interesting.
Impossible.
It's
if you can get to that point or even close to that point, you will have absolutely no problem seeing all of your shots at a PRS match.
That's cool. It's a lot like the physics. Physics that go into shooting. There's physics that go into like when you're shooting a basketball. Like you got to be square to the hoop. You got to have everything in line. It's interesting how sports sometimes jump across waves.
Well, it's the same. Ruben can attest. Pistol shooting is probably the most complicated style of shooting out there as far as technique goes. There is so much that goes into shooting a pistol fast and accurate.
I can't
and precise.
do it.
I'm in there with you. Yeah, I've always said if I could go back in time, I would have started with pistol shooting just to have that much better of a trigger control. Because with pistol shooting, trigger control's what percentage of the game, Ruben, would you say trigger control is with pistol shooting?
Knowing when to press the trigger and stuff, like that's all the majority of being accurate. Your grip is a big part of it and stuff, and your stance plays into it.
If you don't have a good trigger pull, you're missing the target.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that because I do a little bit of the training around here when we get new employees, and if they're not super familiar with shooting and they want to be, like, we'll offer training to them, and so whenever you see somebody that's shooting, if they're consistently missing left or consistently missing right, or sometimes they just sometimes they shoot awesome right off the bat and like you don't have much to improve upon. But one of the cool parts about training pistol shooting is that you can almost always look at their feet, look at their shoulders, and look at their hands and their trigger position on the gun. And as long as you keep those things, it's remembering to keep all of those things correct. Straight. Yeah, like feet shoulder width apart, 80% of the weight on the balls of your feet, 20% on your heels, knees slightly bent, square to the target. And like, as long as you keep all of those things in line with one another, like, you're going to be successful. And when something starts dropping off, like accuracy or cadence or anything, you just go back to the basics. And you see it really easy though with pistol shooting, right? Because typically we're probably talking about shooting semi-automatic pistol, and so it's like boom, boom, boom. Okay, something's happening. Okay, correct. Now you see it, right? And with precision rifle shooting, typically you got a bolt gun or even a gas gun, but like the targets are farther away, so it's harder to see.
Well, I can tell you, and I definitely have been victim of this to myself, is bolt guns are very forgiving. And if you don't regularly revisit the basics, you can develop some bad habits
Do you guys
very
dry
quickly.
Fire?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, you should.
Yeah.
Anyways, and if you don't, that's when you start developing bad habits, because if you're just going and shooting PRS matches and just shooting for practice and not dry firing, I promise you're going to develop bad habits.
Those bad habits come out on the clock too, and that's not a good thing.
Exactly.
What kind of stuff do you notice when you're dry firing? Do you notice because I imagine when you're dry firing, you don't have that recoil, so you can probably see through your scope, like, I pulled it to the right.
Yeah. So typically, if I'm going to dry fire, I'm not big on dry firing in the house. I don't feel like I can see things all that great. If I'm in dry fire, I want to dry fire at 100 yards.
Sure.
On a target, so I can see what's happening when I pull the trigger. At close range,
it's tough.
It's hard to tell if you're doing anything wrong, really.
So at 100, that's not like necessarily the minimum. That's kind of like the optimal, because you can
it's the optimal because you can see everything, right? If you get farther than that, you might not see.
Jim, like when we talk about dry firing being important, and a good way to bring it in perspective, that was pistol dry firing was brought into perspective to me by another shooter in the sport, was if you were pressing a trigger and you're applying force to that trigger, right? And all of a sudden it breaks, the hammer drops, the firing pin hits, right? All of a sudden that pressure is the same as if you were pulling on a rope real hard and you got your feet set real well, like properly. That rope breaks, and if you're pulling on that rope properly, your hands will move a little bit, but your feet aren't going to move, okay? Now, if you're pulling on a rope and you're leaning way back on it and your feet are uneven, all of a sudden the rope breaks, you fall on your butt, okay? Like, that's what happens when you press a trigger. All of a sudden the trigger breaks and your finger follows through the very small rest of the trigger pull distance. And if you're pulling one way or the other way after that trigger breaks, that force is going to be exerted on the gun, either back and right, back and left, and your shot's going to be pulled.
So all this stuff that's driving the gun is not just long range related.
No.
It goes across the way.
Absolutely.
I mean, you talk about driving the gun when you're talking about like your 3-gun AR. I mean, it sounds like pistol for sure, but I mean, this really seems to carry over into all kinds of shooting.
Yeah, absolutely. And muscle isolation is a big part of that. Scott talked about it with isolating your strong hand bicep, right? Or your trigger hand bicep. That's a big part of it. Let's just take shooting on the move using a carbine, for example, like a 3-gun rifle or whatever. If we were shooting on the move, I'm moving not completely upright. My knees will be slightly bent. Like, I'm moving in line. And if you think of it, exactly how you would move if you were carrying a spoonful of water or a spoon with an egg on it, everything has to be fluid. Everything has to be smooth. I don't want the up and down joltiness when my knee's perfectly upright or in line. Like, I want everything to be fluid. I don't want anything to be bouncing. And so when I'm shooting on the move with a rifle, I'm doing all that. Almost like it would be like watching a cat. Like, not me. I'm not, I'm slightly less graceful than a 40-pound tomcat. But if you're shooting on the move, you need to be fluid, and that's part of driving that gun. Part of driving a pistol is, grip, stance, trigger press, all that. So there's a lot of different aspects to it. But yeah, we're talking about the same thing.
Okay.
Well, and hearing you describe that trigger pull process too, it really brought out to me, like, when the trigger breaks and the gun goes bang, it's not over. Like, you are still, like, finishing out that process. At least the way the follow through.
Yeah, you have a lock time, right? There's a lock time that's called when the trigger breaks to when the firing pin ignites the primer. And in a bolt gun, that can be anywhere from 2 to 3 milliseconds. In an AR, because of the geometry of a trigger and how it has to
2 to 3 times longer.
it can be up to 8 milliseconds
Why
or
it's hard
9
to shoot
milliseconds.
a AR as good as you can shoot a bolt gun.
And so follow through is exaggerated. The importance of follow through is exaggerated when you shoot an AR compared to when you shoot a bolt gun because of the trigger. Yeah, so a bolt gun trigger typically is like you're taking a firing pin that is held back with a spring, and when you pull the trigger, you're dropping that sear out of the way.
Yeah.
And then that hammer is allowed to go forward. Now with an AR, as you know, we've built ARs and we play with ARs here at the shop all the time. When you pull that trigger, it has to follow that radius, that arc. And so that's where that
It's like the
7 to 9 milliseconds comes in, right?
Yeah, it's like the difference between sidestepping the clutch and letting off the clutch. Like you normally would.
No,
It's
Exactly
totally.
what I was thinking.
Quintessential car reference. I couldn't go without it.
I saw the
Pretty
rally
sure
out
I've-
there today.
Pretty sure I've done one in every podcast thus far. So, but that's pretty cool. So PRS seems like, I mean, I guess coming into this, I thought we'd almost talk about like, oh man, we're gonna find this like secret way into PRS because it's so like it's so like secretive. It's really not. I mean, it's a lot in your head, and it seems like it can transition over to other shooting sports.
Right.
Like anybody who's really just interested in shooting sports and that competitive outlet.
Absolutely.
It takes 3 pounds at maximum to break the trigger. I guarantee you every man, woman, and child in this building could break that trigger, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Same way with everybody on the range can shoot very similar to as fast as Jerry Michalik or Josh Fralick. Not as accurately and fast, but
That's for sure.
a lot of this goes to mental game and preparation and your core fundamentals of shooting.
Yeah. Could I go out with my Ruger American and 6.5 Creedmoor with a Diamondback Tactical first focal plane on it and shoot a PRS match?
Yep.
As long as you got a detachable mag.
Okay.
Yep.
I need
Yeah.
a detachable mag.
I mean, you don't need one,
but
but
it
you're going to
helps.
time out on every
Oh,
stage if you
yeah,
don't
that's
have
right.
one.
It will, yeah. Yeah, I forgot about the time aspect. Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
So-
I mean, it's a lighter weight gun. It's definitely not 15 pounds, but you can do that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, people aren't going to just like,
Yeah.
Oh, man.
I would definitely recommend going to your first match with the bare minimum essentials, spending the least amount of money as possible. Because I promise you, if you go and spend, thousands of dollars on a bunch of brand new stuff, chances are you're going to sell or put in the closet 80% of it because it's not what you actually like the best for, once you learn
yeah.
what you like.
It's funny that you say that because I think that was my biggest mistake when I started off. I had a custom rifle built. I mean, I started
You went
whole
in big.
hog, man. I got everything that I thought that I would possibly need immediately. I do think that looking back, I probably take just my deer rifle and a single bag with me would probably have been the best way to start because then I can really see the things that I wish that I could change and appreciate them differently. I don't want to say appreciate them more, but appreciate them differently.
Dude, that blows my mind.
And
I literally thought that, like, I just wouldn't be allowed if I brought in my Ruger American.
I mean, the only thing I would recommend to people is like, look, if you have, and there's definitely a few other rifles out there, if you have a Savage or a Remington and it's got, a BDL style bottom metal on it, the only thing you need to change to go out and shoot a match, the only thing you're really going to need is a bipod, a rear bag. A backpack's not a bad idea to carry your ammo,
Helps.
some water, that kind of stuff. Everybody, I'm sure, has a backpack.
Yeah.
And then the only thing you're really going to need to buy if you don't have a bipod and a rear bag already, and a rear bag, honestly, you can make out of with a sock.
I
if you
use
want.
toilet paper rolls, actually. They're pretty slick because you can squeeze them and then that raises them up, or you can smush them down.
Yeah.
I used it
And
at the
It'll
extreme
work
one year.
till
Dual
it rains.
purpose.
Until it rains, it'll be great.
Yeah, that was.
Although I guess you
luckily
could put it in a Ziploc bag.
True.
Sure.
It didn't rain at the extreme that
but
year, so it's good.
what you want to do, there's companies out there. If you have a gun that has BDL bottom metal, PTG makes bottom metal that'll literally go right into a Remington BDL cut, and you can run 10-round magazines. CDI, I think is the name of the company, makes bottom metal for Savages. You can literally just replace the bottom metal on your gun, get rid of the follower and the spring that's in there already, and then you run detachable magazines, and you can go try.
Yeah, or like a
PRS
mag
style
pull,
match.
like a mag pull stock. Those aren't
Or
super
you can
expensive.
buy,
Buy
you
a
can
mag
buy
pull
a mag
hunter.
pull. Yeah,
But
Yeah.
they
If you
take-
got a
you know,
700 or
and
now
they
the
come with the
American.
bottom metal and the mag.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
That's pretty slick.
Yeah, not to interject, but I remember one time I was up again in northern Minnesota on vacation, and I get a text from Mason that's like, "Hey, come out to the range. We have a PRS match that's happening, or precision match, right?" And I had brought a bunch of my stuff with because we were planning on shooting the next day at a flat range, and I showed up. I left all my guns and stuff at the cabin, and I showed up, and I was like, oh, that guy has a 700 BDL. Like, that's my deer rifle. Like, I didn't bring my nice rifles because I was like, I don't have enough stuff to shoot this kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
And I showed up and I was like, oh yeah, I can go back and get my stuff. It'll work.
I guess I do have enough stuff.
That's sweet.
and on top of that, like, let's say, most guys shooting PRS are hand loading their own ammo. However, you definitely do not have to these days.
No.
With the factory ammo that they have. Match ammo.
The stuff that Hornady's making, Prime, guys, there's a number of companies just making phenomenal ammunition these days. Matter of fact, the last match I shot factory 6 Creedmoor ammo, and honestly, that gun shoots as good as any gun I own with that factory.
That
ammo.
was actually really impressive. I mean,
it's phenomenal.
Wow.
What was the standard deviation? Like 6 feet per second?
Yeah.
Like, it was just silly.
I mean, it's literally shooting in the zeros.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It was crazy.
Yeah. I mean, it's phenomenal, which is great because, unfortunately, being in the industry, a lot of times you don't have that extra time to load ammo a couple weeks in advance. So if something happens and you can just use factory ammo, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even if you got like some weird cartridge or something, you can look up like Copper Creek will load your ammo.
Copper Creek will load ammo for you.
You don't have to hand load.
Yeah,
That's cool.
There are still benefits of hand loading,
Yeah,
but if
cost,
you
if
if you
nothing
need
else.
to, I mean, there are really good ammo on the market. I mean, that you can just take to a match.
there are matches won with factory ammo.
Oh yeah.
Period.
Yep.
Simple as that.
I gotta try this now.
You should. Lodi this
If you're
weekend.
if you're listening, you gotta try this now.
There's a match at Lodi this weekend?
There's no more excuses.
It is this weekend. isn't
Yeah.
PRS.
Saturday.
PRS.
You want to go? You can go with me. We'll go and hit it up.
Sounds good.
All right.
PRS is
Might
not
be
that hard to
raining,
get to.
but-
If you're listening,
Go with a buddy. Like,
Yeah,
honestly,
man.
like if you can go with a buddy, because then even if you do go and you have super helpful people there that are helping you along, like it kind of is still like trying out CrossFit and everybody's watching you and you don't know how to do all the exercises, right? Like
that is true. It is sometimes just having another.
But the people aren't critical. That's the thing to remember. Like they want you to do good. They want you to have
criticism
fun.
is all in your head.
Yeah.
I mean, it's as soon as you mess up in your head, you're like, oh, everybody's thinking this, even though everybody behind you is just like already they're thinking about like how they're going to shoot this stage, or they're kind of like, oh man, like this person's new. But in
Yeah.
your head, you're like, oh, everybody just thinks I'm an idiot.
I'll tell you what. I'll throw this
And
out.
like-
I'll throw this out there right now for anybody listening. If you go to a match and by the time the end of the match is done, you feel that nobody there helped you, and nobody was there was extremely helpful.
And then everybody hates you.
You email in, let us know, and I will personally fly down to the next match you want to go to and shoot it with you.
I was just going to
Dude,
say
that was the ultimate.
I thought he was
call.
gonna go beat him up.
Scott is your new on-call big brother.
I thought Scott was going to say it's not them, it's you.
They're just jealous.
No, one thing I was thinking about this, like not to overshadow anything, but I was thinking about this. Okay, you're gonna be nervous the first time you go shoot. You're going to. You're
it's
gonna.
impossible not to
Absolutely.
But guess what? It goes
You're
away.
nervous the 30th match you go to.
It
It's
goes
a
away.
competition.
It goes away though, like it does over time. Like
Absolutely.
you get up to the line. I don't even know anybody's watching anymore. And keep them like regardless. Like I've been shooting a while, but it wasn't long. It wasn't long, and you stop thinking about other people because guess what? It's super fun.
Dude, if you go to any competitive anything and you don't have a little bit of just like little bit of raise in your heart rate or like a little bit
That's
of like
just not.
Oh, you gotta
American.
get them
you're
butterflies,
just
or else
like
you're
you're just
not.
not
having fun.
American.
You're
I was
not
gonna
in the
say
right. You're not in the right competition.
Yeah.
Like if whatever you're doing for a competition doesn't get your blood pumping and doesn't get your nerves, just like your whole adrenaline system and all that going a little bit, you got to find a new competition.
Yeah.
You got to do something else
Yeah.
because like this is an outlet for like
Yeah,
competitive energy.
outlet.
Well, and that's a big reason why you're there. If there wasn't that intensity and you weren't having those emotions and you weren't psyched up and maybe a little bit nervous and
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of it. That's why you're showing up.
That's why people go on roller coasters. Like if roller coasters didn't like kind of scare you, you wouldn't go on it because otherwise it's just a waste of time.
It's just a really crappy driver.
I literally, I literally laugh hysterically the whole time on a roller coaster.
Yeah,
Little secret
I do
about me.
too.
Interesting.
We're going to the fair.
Yeah.
Not a fair. No, not the
Not
stories
gonna
I've
ride
been
the
seeing
zipper with me?
about fairs. Not going on one of those roller coasters.
Clowns are a different story.
I've got
hysterically.
I've got a question. It's not really a PRS question. It's more of just like a maybe like proper shooting or things you can do. You guys may know this, but most of my shooting is hunting based, right? It's kind of like where I focus my time and purely hypothetical. But let's say you had an affinity for a super snappy 300 short mag that maybe isn't the friendliest rifle to shoot, but you shoot it anyway.
Would be a Browning A-bolt.
I think this person's name is Bark.
Bark more.
We'll call him Bark Mordman. But like, so what are some things, or maybe this applies to, a lot of guys are running, larger bore rifles, not the super sweet like 6 Creeds or even the 6.5 Creed. What are some things like a person that can do that's shooting that type of rifle? You're talking about driving the rifle. What are some things that you can do to, assist in, shooting that rifle more accurately?
The same exact things I went over.
Yeah,
it's the same exact principle. Is it going to keep the gun on the ground? Probably not. If you're shooting a 6-pound 300 Wisdom,
Right.
It's gonna hurt, or you're gonna know. It might not hurt, but you're gonna know you shot a rifle.
However,
Yeah, you can tell your friend that, Mark.
when you get
Asking for a friend.
when you get good at driving the gun, that gun you will get some muzzle rise out of it. But if you do it right, it will come back down very close to the same spot you shot it at.
And you're not talking about giving it a death grip or anything like that. Yeah.
Something
In
that
fact,
we
that
didn't
might
really,
actually be bad, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
something we didn't really talk about at all is natural point of aim, and that is getting into a position where, while you're relaxed, your crosshairs are on target.
Gotcha.
Because
and that's an easy thing to do, right? So, well, not necessarily easy to find that position, but it's an easy thing to test.
Correct.
So, natural point of aim, the quickest, easiest way to test it is to get on target, close your eyes for 5-10 seconds, and then open your eyes and see where your crosshairs are.
Yeah. Well,
or your iron sights if you're shooting pistol.
Fool me once, shame on you, Scott. So
Edit.
That brings up another point, though. I mean, like, I know wrapping up soon, but like, competitive shooting is great for hunters to do. It makes you a more ethical hunter, I think.
Oh,
Oh man,
absolutely.
totally.
Oh, I think the spawn of the PRS happened right at the same time long range shooting came about, and long range hunting came about. Excuse me. And I'll tell you, back then it was real point of contention. The ethical side of it.
Sure.
I'm sure you remember, Mark. We used to discuss it on a regular basis.
Yep.
And now it's definitely calmed down quite a bit. You don't see it. You definitely got your few outliers out there that are still just totally against long range hunting.
Mm-hmm.
There's no doubt about that. But it's nowhere near what it was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think the bottom line is anything you can do personally to be more effective, not necessarily even more effective, but just, the end result is you're taking the life of an animal, right, for consumption.
Humanely as possible.
To do it as humanely and quickly and as efficiently as possible. And if that means practicing at 1,200 yards, so you can take a super effective 100-yard shot or 200 shot or whatever you kind of dictate as like, your maximum effective range or whatever you're comfortable with. Or, I mean, I know guys that shoot at extreme distances, but they still don't want to take a shot further than 300 yards.
Right.
But they're damn good shots at 300 yards.
Yep.
either way, you're helping yourself hone those skills so that you're better in the other discipline.
Yeah. I'll tell you, not to flip-flop subjects here, but I'm going to get back on the PRS thing. Something I kind of left out and just left my mind in the beginning here, when we were asking like kind of where the PRS came from. And I'll get to this real quick, the PRS matches, precision rifle competitions definitely have been around for a long time. Okay. And however, they used to be called something different. They were called sniper matches. So if you've heard sniper matches, it's basically the same thing. That yes, they have morphed quite a bit over the years. However, calling them sniper matches it just wasn't right? Because we're not actually doing all the stuff that our military and or LE snipers do, right? Shooting is a very, very small part of what they do.
Yeah.
And
Plus,
all
you don't
we are
have
doing
to-
is shooting.
You don't have to be a sniper to join the match.
Exactly.
Correct.
Like
There
an
is that.
actual- Right.
But for the longest time, they were called sniper matches. Now, I will say back then, a lot of the matches did have us doing stuff like, milling targets, stalking with ghillie suits. So they were definitely more geared toward, sniper style stuff. But they definitely morphed way more into just shooting.
Yeah.
And so I think everybody saw fit to really not call them sniper matches anymore.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Just out of respect and out of just, kind of a truer name.
Yeah.
Right.
Sweet. Well, I'd say that this last little ending here has been a good last call all in and of itself.
Yeah.
The only other thing I'd say is confirming once more that if you go to a PRS match and people aren't very nice to you, Scott Parks has an on-call Big Brother service, and
I mean
call
that
him.
too.
Yeah. And the nice part about this Big Brother is that when you tell him he's bigger than your Big Brother, he actually is. So
I have one. If I
Send
can,
it.
Yeah, just gonna send this one. If you have questions, you can I'll always call Vortex. You can give any of us a call. If we don't have the right info, we'll get you the right person. But look at some of the companies that make gear for some of these sports. I mean, the reason they make that gear is because they either really like the sport, they support it a lot, or they have people on their staff that do it. And so, if you're had questions about, what kind of bags you should buy, call Tom at Armageddon Gear. Tom he shoots PRS. He's been in it since the beginning.
Yeah.
You have chassis questions, call and they're probably going to like Vortex get into a lot more than just optics or just chassis. They're going to talk you through getting into the sport and where to go.
Yeah, and there's a number of them. And maybe we should, we probably at some point could make a list. We get into bags. There's, like you said, there's Tom at Armageddon Gear. There's Dave Weiss at Weebad. There's Tony Burks at Tab Gear. Tony's been around for ages. For a long time, he was kind of the only guy in the game. You get into chassis. You got KRG, XLR. All these guys actually shoot and make stuff for shooting precision rifles.
That's why they make it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
They wanted a better mousetrap.
They wanted to do it themselves.
All the barrel companies, which luckily for us, the majority of them are in Wisconsin. Here.
Yep.
Right here in the barrel belt.
Bartlett, Krieger,
I like that.
the king of barrels, Obermeyer, Brooks. I mean, the list just goes on. But all these guys, I can tell you, the majority of the gear that you will see at a PRS match, the overwhelming majority, anyways. Obviously, there's some outliers. The overwhelming majority of the gear at PRS matches is made by people who actually use it.
Yep. That's sweet. Good send, Ruben. Impact.
Send it.
Well done. All right. Well, what do you say we just end this one on the classic bye?
Bye.
Bye. All right, that'll wrap it up for this episode of the Vortex Nation podcast. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Hit that subscribe button so you can always stay up to date on the latest happenings over here at the Vortex Nation podcast. Leave us a review or comment down below. We want to hear what you have to say about the show, maybe what you like, maybe what you didn't like, so that way we can make these podcasts as good as they can be. You can also follow us on Instagram at Vortex Nation Podcast. We'll be posting about each episode released, so that way you can go back, find these things, maybe grab a little nugget of information that you could take with you to the range, out in the field, or maybe to the kitchen if we're talking about some good food. So, again, everybody, thanks, and happy hunting and shooting. We appreciate it. Have a good one.